I had inherited the quiet little house on Juniper Lane just 3 months prior. It was meant to be a fresh beginning, a peaceful retreat from the chaos of the city. Little did I realize those skills would soon become frighteningly and harshly relevant right in my own backyard. The neighborhood, at first sight, appeared picture-perfect. White picket fences, well-manicured lawns, the kind of place where birds sang continuously and everyone waved. It even had its own homeowners association, a seemingly harmless organization created to maintain order. Then the storm arrived. Not a single cloud in the sky, just her presence. The self-proclaimed queen of the HOA, a woman whose mere existence seemed to drain joy from the air, replacing it with a suffocating atmosphere of rules and regulations. It all began with the mailbox. It was 5:58 a.m. My brand new mailbox, a sturdy, standard model, lay twisted on the sidewalk like a pretzel made of aluminum. I assumed it was some careless teenager or maybe a late-night delivery driver. These things happen, right? That afternoon, I went to the hardware store, bought a replacement, and installed it myself. No big deal. Half an hour after I finished, she appeared on my porch. She wore a concerned expression, and a shiny gold badge that read HOA President was pinned to her blazer, as if she were the sheriff of suburbia. "Oh my goodness, I heard about your mailbox. What a terrible accident," she said, peering around me to look inside the house. "I hope you're not too shaken up. We've never had anything like this happen in our neighborhood before. It's so unusual." The way she emphasized unusual made it sound like I had personally invited chaos into their perfect world. She asked about my work schedule, whether I had many visitors, and if I planned any renovations. "We just want to make sure new residents fit in," she explained with that plastic smile. "Some people adjust easily. Others need a little guidance." 2 weeks later, it happened again. The same time, the same angle, the same twisted metal aftermath. I was beginning to see a pattern, but I still told myself it was just bad luck. Maybe someone held a grudge against the previous owner. I replaced the mailbox again, this time installing a small security camera pointed toward the street. Nothing fancy, just a basic setup to catch whoever was responsible. Her second visit brought more questions and far less feigned concern. She inquired about the camera, asking whether I had obtained HOA approval to install surveillance equipment. When I explained it was simply to protect my property, she nodded slowly, as if mentally filing the information for future reference. Of course. We all want to feel secure. Just remember, cameras mustn't point toward neighboring homes. Privacy is paramount in our community." She then handed me a thick HOA rulebook, a volume seemingly authored by lawyers who build by the word. The third mailbox was destroyed on a chilly October morning. This time I was prepared. From my bedroom window, I observed a black SUV approach precisely at 5:58 a.m., slow down just enough to aim perfectly, then speed directly into my mailbox with the precision of a guided missile. The impact scattered metal across my lawn, and I finally caught a clear view of the license plate. It matched the SUV parked in the driveway of the largest house on the street, her residence. That day, I reviewed the security footage closely and took meticulous notes. The pattern was unmistakable. Every other Monday, same time, same deliberate strike. This was no random vandalism or careless driving. It was personal, systematic harassment disguised as accidents. But why? I barely knew her. We had maybe 3 polite conversations. Then it dawned on me like a ton of suburban bricks. During our first talk, she asked if I was single, mentioned her favorite coffee shop, and suggested we get acquainted. I politely declined, explaining I was focused on settling in and work. Her smile flickered briefly before returning at full force. Apparently, my polite refusal was taken as a declaration of war. After the third incident, she showed up again. I watched her carefully as she inspected the wreckage with the zeal of an art critic admiring a masterpiece, photographing it from multiple angles for the HOA's records. She remarked how these incidents seemed to happen only to my mailbox, never anyone else's, and hinted I might want to relocate it to a safer spot. When I pointed out that the mailbox had stood exactly where previous owners had placed it for 30 years without issue, she shrugged. "Sometimes change brings unforeseen consequences," she said, and walked away. Monday morning, 5:58 a.m. I stood at my bedroom window, coffee in hand, watching her black SUV roll up like clockwork. She had no idea I was ready this time, unaware that I had recorded every one of her accidents from multiple camera angles. The impact played out just as predicted. A careful approach, a brief pause to aim, then full acceleration into mailbox number 4. The crunch of metal echoed through the quiet neighborhood as I watched her SUV back away like a hit-and-run fleeing the scene. But this time was unlike the others. I had everything recorded on video. Crystal clear footage of her, the HOA president and self-appointed ruler of the neighborhood, intentionally damaging my property with the precision of someone who had done it many times before. I had her license plate, her face visible through the windshield, and the unmistakable body language of a person who believed she was above consequences. She was about to find out how mistaken she was. 30 minutes later, right on schedule, she knocked on my door. "Honey, we need to talk," she said, barging into my living room without waiting for an invitation. This whole mailbox situation is becoming quite worrisome. Worrisome how? I asked, genuinely curious about where this was headed. She made herself comfortable on my couch as if presiding over a court, smoothing her blazer and fixing me with a stare that probably worked on many before me. "Well, sweetie, this neighborhood has standards, certain expectations. Some neighbors adapt, while others require correction." Her tone carried the authority of someone accustomed to unquestioned obedience. She grilled me about my work schedule. Did I work from home? How often did I receive deliveries? Did clients visit? Did I realize home-based businesses needed special permits? The thing is, Caleb, Derek, and I have duties to this community. We keep things neat and orderly, safe for families. We cannot allow residents who disregard the rules we've all agreed upon. You know what, Rhonda? You're absolutely right. Standards matter. Consistency matters. People should receive exactly what they deserve. Something in my voice made her hesitate briefly, but she quickly recovered, flashing that plastic smile before standing to leave. "I'm glad we're on the same page," she said as she headed toward the door. "Oh, and honey, you might want to think about moving that mailbox somewhere safer. These accidents seem to happen only to yours, and we wouldn't want anyone to get hurt." The casual cruelty in her voice was stunning. She was openly admitting to the destruction while implicitly threatening to escalate things if I didn't comply with her unspoken demands. After she left, I spent the morning poring over the HOA regulations she'd handed me. It was a bureaucratic masterpiece designed to grant the board unlimited control over residents' lives. Vague terms like community standards and aesthetic harmony could be twisted however leadership pleased. Grass couldn't be taller than 3 inches. Paint colors had to be approved neutral shades. No unauthorized signs, no modifications without permission, no activities that could disturb others' peaceful enjoyment. I called my neighbor, a 70-year-old widow next door who had become my unofficial guide to neighborhood politics. "Oh, honey," she said when I told her about the conversation, "you need to be careful. That woman has forced 3 families out in the past 2 years. The Johnsons, the Rodriguez family, and those nice young people with the twins. She finds violations everywhere, piles on fines until people can't afford to stay." She invited me over for coffee and showed me her collection of violation notices. 23 in total, each for increasingly absurd offenses. Grass supposedly too tall, measured to fractions of an inch. Garden flowers claimed to be unauthorized species. Even her American flag was apparently displayed improperly. Fines ranged from $75 to $300 and accumulated faster than anyone could realistically contest. "She does this to anyone who doesn't immediately bow to her authority," she explained, pulling out a thick folder of documentation. "New residents get tested first. If you pass the obedience test, she leaves you alone. Show any sign of independence or backbone, and she methodically destroys you until you have no choice but to move." She showed me photos of other targeted families, all of whom had committed the crime of questioning her control in some minor way. That afternoon, she launched her first official move against me. Her anxious deputy arrived at my door clutching a clipboard. He handed me a yellow violation notice filled with formal bureaucratic jargon that essentially stated, "Your grass measured 3.2 inches tall instead of the regulated 3 inches maximum." The fine was $75, due within 48 hours. That evening, I measured my lawn with a ruler and found it was exactly the same height as every other yard on the street, yet only mine had been cited. While walking around the neighborhood snapping photos for comparison, I caught her watching me from her window, likely plotting her next move in this strange suburban chess game. The violation notice, printed on bright yellow paper, was prominently posted on my front door like some medieval decree exposing my crimes to the entire neighborhood. Other residents passed by avoiding eye contact, likely relieved they weren't the current target. The message was clear: comply or be crushed. That night, I sat in my workshop staring at the growing pile of mailbox wreckage and reflecting on what my neighbor had told me. 3 families had been driven from their homes by a woman intoxicated by the little power her HOA presidency afforded. How many more would follow if no one stood up to her? How many neighbors were living in constant fear, tiptoeing around, afraid to plant the wrong flowers or paint their shutters the wrong color? Watching her nail that yellow paper to my door like an edict, I finally understood. This wasn't about mailboxes. This was about control, and she had chosen the wrong person to control. The yellow papers began appearing on my door with clockwork precision. Every Tuesday morning, her deputy arrived nervously with his clipboard, posting yet another violation while she watched from her SUV parked across the street. It was psychological warfare disguised as municipal bureaucracy, perfected into a science. By the end of the second week, my front door resembled a crime scene bulletin board. 5 violation slips appeared in one morning. Unauthorized paint. Grass 0.2 inches too tall. Aggressive parking posture. Suspicious tool use. And the classic, failure to comply with community aesthetics. She had dropped all pretense. This was a siege. By the third week, their tactics grew creative. Vehicle placement obstructs pedestrian sightlines. My car, legally parked in my driveway exactly where my grandparents had parked for 30 years, suddenly became a community hazard, a $200 fine. Then came excessive noise during permitted hours, because I used power tools in my garage workshop during allowed times, a $300 fine. The noise complaint was especially ironic, as I had been quietly crafting a jewelry box for a romantic comedy when her deputy knocked on my door. I began documenting everything with the thoroughness of a special effects artist. Photos, timestamps, measurements, recordings. I had side-by-side shots proving my grass matched my neighbor's. Paint samples showed my white was identical to approved homes. Decibel readings from my workshop were quieter than normal conversation. None of it mattered. She had weaponized HOA rules into a personal destruction machine, and she was just getting started. The psychological pressure was incredibly effective. Every morning, I checked my front door for new yellow notices like a bureaucratic scarlet letter. Neighbors started avoiding eye contact as they passed by, likely grateful they weren't the target, but also afraid that supporting me might make them next. The isolation was intentional and brutal. One afternoon, my neighbor slipped me a note. "She's driving past your house 6 times a day taking photos. She did the same to the Martinez family before forcing them out. Be careful." I began tracking her surveillance schedule, realizing she treated my home like a military objective, documenting every detail and searching for new angles of attack. My first attempt to fight back was subtle and fully legal. I put up a sign in my front yard that read, "Area under HOA surveillance," with official-looking symbols and fine print about monitoring equipment. It was factually accurate, visually neutral, and completely compliant with the regulations I'd studied in depth. Her response was swift and severe. Her deputy arrived within 2 hours, sweating more than usual and clutching a violation notice that seemed to practically steam. Unauthorized signage displaying unapproved messaging creates community discord. $500 fine. When I protested that the sign met all official requirements, her deputy actually looked sorry for me. She says the intent is clearly confrontational, which violates the community harmony clause. That evening, she called me directly for the first time. Her voice was icy and professional, with a barely concealed edge of anger. "Honey, I think we need to clear something up. This community has rules for a reason. When residents start thinking they're smarter than the system, when they believe they can outwit the people who've upheld these standards for years, well, that's when things get complicated." She paused long enough for the warning to sink in. "Your total fines currently add up to $1,200. That might sound like a lot, but trust me, it can climb much higher if we continue playing these little games." I hung up and did the math. In just 3 weeks, she had fabricated over $1,000 in fines for violations that existed only in her imagination. At this pace, she'd have grounds to place a lien on my house within 2 months. I contacted my neighbor to ask about the families who had been forced out, and the story was always the same: escalating violations, mounting fines, impossible deadlines, until selling the property became the only financially feasible option. The next morning brought violation number 6, landscaping placement within prohibited setback zone. The memorial flower garden my grandparents had planted 30 years ago was suddenly too close to the street. The fine was $750, plus a mandatory removal of all non-compliant plants within 72 hours. This one hit differently. It was personal. That afternoon, I spent time in the garden my grandparents had lovingly cared for, measuring distances and reviewing old property surveys. These were more than flowers. They were Sunday afternoons with Grandma. Kneeling in the dirt and Grandpa humming while laying the stepping stones, watching her destroy them felt like watching memories burn. But she cared neither for history nor legality. Her goal was to break me. When her deputy arrived the next day with violation number 7, excessive garage use for non-residential purposes, I asked him bluntly, "Do you actually believe any of these violations are real?" He looked nervously around, as if she might be hiding in the bushes with a recording device. "Look, man, I just do what she tells me. I need this job on my resume for the city council election. She has connections." The man was a coward, but at least he knew what they were doing was wrong. That night, I sat alone in my dimly lit workshop, the hum of old tools and scattered blueprints surrounding me like ghosts of past projects. I meticulously tallied the mounting damage. $1,550 in fines, and new notices were arriving every few days like clockwork. The deadline she imposed loomed ominously: 1 week to pay up or face intensified enforcement actions, which almost certainly meant a lien on my house. This wasn't her first time playing this ruthless game. She had honed this system into a well-oiled machine designed to grind down anyone bold enough to defy her. But she had made one fatal error. She didn't know who she was dealing with. In my profession, I didn't just create things built to fail under pressure. I specialized in crafting objects that appeared delicate, vulnerable, even disposable, but concealed incredible strength and resilience beneath the surface. I was preparing to unleash that expertise on a very particular project, one that would send a clear message. The memorial garden was more than just a patch of earth. It was the heart and soul of my grandparents' legacy. Every spring, Grandma would spend countless hours tenderly caring for the roses they had planted together, coaxing them through decades of harsh Michigan winters and blistering summers. Their careful nurturing had blossomed into a breathtaking display that drew admiration from neighbors and visitors alike. Grandpa himself had painstakingly laid each stepping stone, creating gentle pathways winding through the flower beds, inviting people to walk slowly, breathe deeply, and appreciate the variety of colors and scents. This garden wasn't just flowers and stones. It was a living testament to their love, a symbol of hope, patience, and devotion that transformed our small corner of the world into something truly beautiful. It held memories of quiet Sunday mornings, the soft hum of bees, and the gentle laughter shared between generations. And now it was under attack. She demolished it on a cold, crisp Thursday morning in November. From the warmth of my kitchen, I watched through the window as she arrived, accompanied by her deputy and another accomplice. Both carried measuring devices and clipboards, moving with the air of officials conducting some formal inspection. She walked directly into the garden, her face set in a stern, businesslike expression. Pointing at various plants, she directed her assistant, who dutifully jotted down notes. Then, without hesitation, she began methodically trampling through the flower beds. This wasn't an accident, nor a moment of clumsiness. With deliberate, calculated cruelty, she crushed the antique roses, those resilient blossoms that had weathered over 30 harsh Michigan winters. She scattered the carefully placed memorial stones my grandpa had set down to honor their wedding anniversary. Her designer heels crushed daffodil bulbs into the cold earth as her aide documented every supposed property line violation she claimed to find. When I rushed outside to confront them, she looked up from the destruction with that same plastic smile she'd worn when we first met. A smile that masked her callousness. "Oh, honey," she cooed, "we're just conducting the mandatory inspection outlined in your violation notice. These plantings clearly encroach upon the prohibited setback zone, which is a serious safety hazard for emergency vehicles." She gestured toward the crushed roses as if they were toxic waste. "I know it's disappointing," she added with chilling casualness, "but regulations exist for everyone's safety." Her tone was disturbingly indifferent. There she was, annihilating 30 years of love and devotion while lecturing me about community safety. I sank to my knees among the ruined flowers, my hands trembling with fury as I gathered the shattered fragments of the memorial stones. The garden wasn't just dirt and plants, it was history, memories, a legacy ripped apart before my eyes. That night I stared at the garden through my window, unable to sleep. I opened a new browser tab to research how to forfeit a house to the HOA. I even drafted a resignation letter for the property. I felt exhausted and defeated. She hadn't just destroyed a garden. She had torn away the last piece of home I had left. Then I noticed it. Grandpa's old gardening book, untouched on the shelf. I opened it to a dog-eared, faded page and found a note tucked between brittle leaves, handwritten by him. It read, "We don't plant roses for today. We plant them so someone else can sit in the shade tomorrow." I sat down on the floor. For the first time since this battle began, I cried, but not out of despair, because I remembered why I started. "These roses were 30 years old," I said, my voice barely steady. "My grandparents planted them together. They've stood here longer than half the houses in this neighborhood." She just shrugged, already filling out another violation notice. "Property violations don't have sentimental exceptions, honey. Rules are rules." Her assistant looked genuinely uneasy for the first time since I'd met him. He kept glancing at the destroyed garden, then at her, then back at his clipboard as if wishing he could disappear into the paperwork. When I asked if he thought this was necessary, he mumbled something about following protocol and avoided eye contact. The man was a coward, but at least he knew what they were doing was wrong. "For landscaping violations, plus immediate removal of all non-compliant vegetation," she declared, handing me yet another yellow notice. "You have 72 hours to clear everything and replant with approved ground cover. Failure to comply will lead to additional fines and possible legal action." She inspected the destruction with satisfaction, like an artist admiring her masterpiece. That afternoon, my neighbor arrived with tears in her eyes. She had witnessed the entire event from her window and recorded it on her phone. "Honey, she's gone too far this time. That garden was registered with the Neighborhood Historical Society. Your grandmother used to give tours to garden club visitors from 3 different counties. Everyone adored those roses." My neighbor showed me the video she had captured, clear footage of the woman deliberately destroying plants while claiming to measure property lines. I spent the evening amidst the ruins of my grandparents' garden, trying to save what I could. Some bulbs might survive if replanted quickly. A few rose bushes could possibly recover if pruned heavily and given a chance. But 30 years of careful cultivation, shared memories, and peaceful Sunday mornings spent weeding together were lost forever. All because one woman couldn't tolerate anyone living outside her control. The total fines had reached $2,300. She gave me one final ultimatum: pay in full within 7 days or face foreclosure proceedings. She had danced this dance before, knowing exactly how to push people beyond their breaking point, how to make staying and fighting cost more than leaving quietly. But this time she had badly miscalculated. I called in sick to work and spent the next 3 days in my garage workshop designing something special. Not just a mailbox replacement, but a statement, a line in the sand, a trap disguised as surrender. I drafted plans, calculated load-bearing capacities, and ordered materials from suppliers specializing in Hollywood-grade construction. If she wanted to escalate this war, I was ready to give her a battle she'd never forget. Neighbors had begun avoiding me altogether, too afraid to become her next target to show any sympathy or support. I couldn't blame them. They had watched 3 families be destroyed by her systematic campaign of harassment. They knew exactly what happened to those who crossed her, and they had families to protect. But their silence was complicity, making her power seem absolute. On Sunday evening, I stood amid the wreckage of my grandparents' garden and made a promise to their memory. I thought of all the Sunday afternoons we'd spent there together. Grandma teaching me about different rose varieties while Grandpa explained how proper drainage prevented root rot. They had built something beautiful that brought joy to the entire community, and she had destroyed it for no reason other than to assert her power. That night, my neighbor knocked on my door with a plate of homemade cookies and a folder full of documents. "I've been keeping records on her for 2 years," she said softly. "Every violation notice, every family she's targeted, every abuse of power." She handed me the folder, her hands trembling. "That garden meant everything to your grandparents. Don't let her win." Staring at those crushed roses in the moonlight, I vowed to Grandpa's memory that she had bullied her last neighbor. Monday morning, her little game would end with a bang she'd never forget. Sunday night turned into planning mode. I spread blueprints across my workbench like a commander preparing for battle, calculating stress loads and impact resistance, while the rest of Juniper Lane slept peacefully. In Hollywood, we create 2 types of props, those designed to break spectacularly and those built to endure explosions. I was about to build the ultimate example of the latter. The foundation demanded serious engineering, 4 feet deep, reinforced with steel and concrete, meant to anchor something far heavier than a typical mailbox. I had to work in stages during her assistant's lunch breaks and afternoon errands, disguising the work as routine landscaping repairs. My neighbors probably assumed I was finally complying with the violation notices, fixing property line issues by installing new borders. The mailbox conformed perfectly to HOA standards in height, color, and placement. I even printed the local ordinance and double-checked every measurement. On paper, it was flawless. In reality, it was an immovable fortress waiting to withstand any force. From the outside, it looked just like every other mailbox on Juniper Lane: standard aluminum construction, regulation height, approved suburban aesthetics. But beneath that innocent facade was a solid steel core anchored deep in concrete, strong enough to stop a small truck. The entire structure was designed to absorb massive impacts without a single scratch. Her surveillance made the process challenging but not impossible. She drove by 6 times daily like clockwork, slowing to photograph any changes. I scheduled my work around her routine, working in my garage during her lunch hour and installing parts after dark when she was safely inside watching TV. Her assistant delivered violation notices precisely at 10 a.m., so I planned concrete pours for 10:30. The camera system required subtlety, multiple angles, concealed mounts, wireless feeds backing up to remote storage. I wanted every moment of the upcoming impact captured from various perspectives, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence even her cunning couldn't dispute. My neighbor volunteered to help by positioning extra cameras from her window, forming a comprehensive surveillance network. By midweek, her paranoia soared. She began extra drive-bys, sometimes parking across the street for 20 minutes, spying on my house through binoculars. Her assistant mentioned during a violation delivery that she was worried about unauthorized construction, though my permits were all valid and the work was technically landscaping and mailbox installation. The psychological pressure was relentless. New violations appeared daily: excessive tool use during restricted hours, unauthorized material storage, construction debris causing visual pollution. Each came with increasing fines and shrinking deadlines. She sped up her timeline, likely sensing I was preparing something and eager to crush me before I could act. Thursday delivered the ultimate insult: a violation for memorial display without proper permits. Apparently, the small stone marker I'd placed in honor of my grandparents, carefully set within the garden bed, was now a non-conforming memorial. Blight, disrupting Juniper Lane's aesthetic neutrality. The fine was $1,000, with a threat of immediate removal by a professional HOA crew if I didn't comply within 24 hours. This was no longer just personal. This was desecration. The morning of the final showdown arrived cold and crisp. My new mailbox gleamed in the early light, appearing completely harmless. But beneath its suburban exterior, it was a fortress of steel and concrete, waiting. I had a camera hidden inside the mailbox, another concealed in a nearby bird feeder, and my neighbor had her phone discreetly aimed from her living room window. My longtime friend, Sheriff Thompson, was also involved. A man of quiet integrity, tired of the frivolous complaints flooding his office from her. He was hidden in my garage, waiting for my signal. At exactly 5:58 a.m., her black SUV turned the corner. She slowed, took aim, then accelerated. The impact was thunderous, a sickening crunch of metal, a violent jolt shaking me to my core. But instead of the usual sound of a mailbox breaking, there was a different noise, screeching tires, followed by the ominous pop of a rapidly deploying airbag. The SUV rebounded, tilting heavily, its front end crumpled like foil. My mailbox stood flawless, a silent testament to unexpected strength. Through the windshield, I saw her face illuminated by the flashing airbag. Shock and then agonizing pain contorted her features. She wasn't just startled, she was injured. The airbag, designed to protect her in collisions, had deployed with full force, striking her. 30 minutes later, her nervous deputy arrived in his own vehicle, followed by the news van I'd spotted earlier. Reporter Bethany was already setting up her camera, eyes bright with anticipation. I'd given the local station an anonymous tip about a major HOA scandal about to erupt. She emerged from her wrecked SUV, dazed, clutching a handkerchief to her bleeding nose. Her hair was wild, a stark contrast to her usual perfect style. Her pantsuit was rumpled. She marched toward my porch, still holding her clipboard, clearly in pain but fueled by pure fury. You property saboteur!" she shrieked, voice thick with rage and what sounded like a nasal whine from her likely broken nose. "What have you done to my vehicle? This is an act of premeditated automotive assault. You engineered this deliberately. You built an illegal structure. You will pay every penny." She then doubled over, clutching her stomach. "I built a mailbox, following regulations," I said calmly, stepping onto the porch, my cameras recording every agonizing moment. "It seems your vehicle had an unfortunate accident with it. Perhaps reckless driving again?" "Reckless!" she spat, regaining some theatrical flair despite the pain. "I was upholding community standards, and now you owe me for my SUV. This is a criminal act of structural aggression. Also, you owe the HOA $5,000 in fines for your rogue garden, unauthorized sign, excessive noise, and for traumatizing my emotional support squirrel with your loud tools." She brandished the latest, most absurd violation notice like a sacred scroll. "Pay up, Mr. Thorne, or face immediate legal action. I have the authority to foreclose on your property. I will ruin you. I will make you beg." $5,000, you say?" I whispered. "For a garden? A sign? Noise?" I nodded subtly toward the garage. Slowly, the garage door rumbled open, revealing Sheriff Thompson, uniform crisp, expression steady. He stepped out, instantly commanding attention. Karen's eyes, wide with pain and fury, widened further, then narrowed in disbelief. You domestic conspirator!" she screamed, pointing at me, then the sheriff. "This is a setup! Harassment! He's using the police! He's bribed you!" "Karen DuBois," Sheriff Thompson declared, voice authoritative. "You're the one facing charges: extortion, fraud, harassment, reckless endangerment, and property damage. We have security footage of you intentionally ramming this mailbox multiple times. And that $5,000 fine drama, we recorded that too." He held up a small, discreet recorder. "Recordings? No! You can't!" she screamed, lunging at the sheriff, forgetting her pain in a furious rage. "This is illegal surveillance! I'll sue you! I'll sue him! I'll sue everyone! This is a tyrannical overreach of rural law enforcement." At that moment, my grandniece Lily stepped onto the porch from inside the house, holding up a tablet. "Actually, Miss DuBois," she said, her voice calm and clear, "this isn't just recorded, it's live. We're streaming this entire conversation, your crash, your injuries, your accusations, and your attempted extortion to the Juniper Lane Community Facebook group, a local news station, and it's already trending on a national HOA watchdog forum. Over 10,000 people are watching right now." Karen's face, already pale and contorted, shifted to an alarming green. She glanced at Lily, then the news camera, then Sheriff Thompson, desperation flashing in her eyes. "Live? No! You digital terrorist! This is an invasion of privacy. This is public humiliation by electronic subjugation." Then the crescendo. From the crowd of neighbors, emboldened by the live stream and the sheriff's presence, a chorus of voices erupted. "She fined me for my roses being too fragrant. She forced me to paint my mailbox pink. She made me remove my gnome collection, Sheriff, saying they were eyesores. Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor, pushed forward holding a thick folder full of her own fake violation notices. And she fined me for my bird feeder, Sheriff. Said my bird bath was attracting undesirable birds and charged me a $500 nuisance fee. I have the receipt. The reporter, Bethany, sensing a blockbuster story, thrust her microphone into the crowd of angry residents. Multiple allegations of fraudulent fines and abuse of power against Miss DuBois live on air. Karen's eyes darted wildly, her composure shattered. Lies! All lies! He's manipulating them. He's a rural Svengali, hypnotizing them with his prop magic. His gnomes must be mind-controlling them. She lunged for Lily's tablet again, but Sheriff Thompson intercepted her swiftly. Then came the most shocking twist. As Sheriff Thompson restrained Karen gently, her phone, dropped during the struggle, rang loudly on speaker. A gruff male voice boomed, clear for all to hear, including the live broadcast. Karen, did you get those old fools to sign? We need Thorne's property cleared by next month. The developer's restless. Tell him the gnome fines are just the beginning if he won't sell. We need that land for the new luxury condos. Don't screw this up. Silence. And stunned, absolute silence fell over the crowd, the news crew, even Sheriff Thompson. Karen's face paled from green to stark white, then a sickly gray. Her enforcers looked like they wished they could vanish into the pavement. Sheriff Thompson picked up the phone, his face hardening like stone. Sheriff Thompson speaking. Who is this? The voice on the other end immediately hung up. It wasn't just about gnomes, was it, Karen? Sheriff Thompson's voice was low and threatening, each word striking like a hammer. You aim to depress property values, intimidate Elias and the other neighbors, and coerce them into selling their land for a massive development. Those fines were just a tool to drain them financially or scare them off. This has gone beyond HOA violations. This is criminal conspiracy, extortion, and fraud. Karen collapsed. The fight left her, replaced by a pitiful whimper. No, you don't understand. It was for the community, for progress, she stammered, tears streaming down her face, smudging her once perfect makeup. Progress at the cost of your neighbors' homes? Sheriff Thompson shook his head. That's not progress, Karen. That's a felony. Suddenly, the distant wail of sirens filled the air. 2 more sheriff's vehicles with flashing lights screeched to a stop at the curb. Deputies in uniform poured out. The street was now a full crime scene. As Sheriff Thompson cuffed Karen, she let out one last desperate scream, repeating her absurd accusations. He's a rural rogue operative! He built a weaponized mailbox. He's in cahoots with the gnomes! You're making a mistake, Sheriff. This is a constitutional crisis of suburban overreach. Her flailing, cuffed arms knocked her badge off her blazer. It clattered mockingly in the sunlight. A sleek black, unmarked sedan with tinted windows then pulled up. A sharply dressed man with slick hair, the eminent legal counsel, Mr. Sterling Smythe, stepped out. He hadn't expected the live stream, the sheriff, or the police presence. He froze mid-step, jaw dropping as he took in the scene. The crushed SUV, news cameras, Karen in cuffs, and the sheriff staring at him. Percival! Karen wailed, her voice breaking. They know everything! The gnomes! The drone! The land deal! He recorded it all! Sterling Smythe's shark-like grin vanished, replaced by a furious snarl. He lunged, not at the sheriff, but at the news camera, trying to grab it. You have no right to film this! This is confidential business! He shouted, ignoring the live broadcast. Sir, that's destruction of private property! Bethany, the reporter, yelled as her cameraman dodged Sterling Smythe's grab. And you're on camera! Quick as a cat, Sheriff Thompson moved to intercept. And you, sir, are now interfering with an arrest, he said, pulling out another pair of cuffs. You're under arrest for obstruction and conspiracy. Sterling Smythe, realizing his serious mistake, attempted to turn and flee. But my old basset hound Red, ever the faithful guardian and silent witness, was ready. With surprising agility for his age, Red dashed forward, slipped beneath Sterling Smythe's legs, and sent him sprawling into my prize-winning petunias. The lawyer let out a shrill yelp as his expensive suit landed squarely in the freshly fertilized flower bed. Red then sat proudly on his back, letting out a satisfied woof just as a deputy slapped handcuffs on the struggling lawyer. The news cameraman captured everything. Karen, handcuffed and crying, accusing me of gnome telepathy. Sterling Smythe, face down in my petunias, trying to rise while Red sat triumphantly on his back. The confused HOA enforcers attempting to appear unobtrusive, and a bewildered crowd of neighbors cheering and clapping. It was a true spectacle, proving that truth, no matter how ridiculous, always finds a way. Federal charges quickly piled up against her and her eminent legal counsel. Fraud, extortion, harassment, conspiracy to commit land fraud, and even environmental violations. The story went national, a cautionary tale of suburban tyranny and unexpected justice. The FBI even sent an agent to interview me, confirming that the footage from my gnome cams and Lily's live stream were crucial evidence. The Juniper Lane HOA was completely disgraced and immediately dissolved. A new, sensible neighborhood association was formed, led by my neighbor, who promptly declared my gnomes protected historical landmarks and my birdbath a community sanctuary. She even launched a Gnome of the Month award for the most whimsical display.